Eva, the floor is yours. Eva is CEO of KMD AS, and she's going to talk about the Basic Data Program and the Common Public Sector Data Distributor. Glad you can be with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Extremely short introduction to KMD and why we're here. KMD is been part of the public sector digitization in Denmark for more than 40 years. We used to actually be a public sector-owned company until 2009 when we were privatized. And we've been part of building a lot of the public sector digital systems that today makes Denmark, and I was very happy that it came out last week, and we still have the first spot on the most digital economies in Europe. And when you dive into it, actually, the part about the public sector being quite a digital public sector in Denmark is a big part of that first step. So KMD has been part of that, but also what I talked to about here, about some of the things that has happened over the last 15, 20 years, is a very large part of the explanation why Denmark is still on a first spot in digitization. Actually, I'll step back and start this in 2001, when the opportunity for the data distributor, the data hub, was actually created because all public data was what you could, in very simple terms, was set free. It was decided that public data was a valuable source. As somebody earlier and today said, it was a precious asset that needed to be free to everybody. Public data in Denmark is actually very high quality. We have lots of registered, be it geodata, be it personal data, company data, building and land data, all in the individual registers. Very high quality, used for various services in the public sector, but also very specific to those services made to the public sector. So if you wanted to access these data, you often had to pay, and you often had to build a special interface to whatever register you would want to do. Some very large banks, corporations managed to do that, but to a very large extent, there was barriers to real use of public data. So first step was to create a legislation which actually enable public data to be free. And of course, bringing away the barrier of a lot of ministries that says, but we have cost on data operating, we need to maintain the register, what do we do about that? So creating a framework where that you say public data is free and easy to access. Since 2001, there's been at least 4 chapters of digitalization in Denmark. The first one was about digital collaboration, digital signature, manage to send emails to the public sector, a lot of the things we also heard about today. Second phase was about administrative processes, and the third phase from 7 to 10 was about starting to create some of these joint digital infrastructures in the public sector. And that was a bit the time where also the data distributor, the data hub, as we call it sometimes, was imagined. A single hub where you could access public data in a simple interface, always maintained the latest relevant data. That was a bit the dream we had in that third chapter of public sector digitalization in Denmark. Then, of course, things take time about how to do this, how to tender it out, who was to build it. And it is actually only last year that we managed to come online with the first data registers into the Danish data hub. Maybe just, is this forward here? Yeah. Nope. There we go. So creating, first of all, the business case for doing this and the governance around it is some of the very first important steps. And that takes time. It takes time to convince all agencies, all ministries, local and central government to align around a central infrastructure. And it creates time to actually pull together the business case that proves that even though you're not going to get revenues from companies or private citizens buying data, you'll actually still manage to finance this, because even in the public sector and with private companies, you're going to have efficiencies and better data quality in the day-to-day lives. So bringing the business case together, bringing the tender together actually took quite a lot of time. So what is the Data Hub? And this is actually a little bit a very simplified structure for the Data Hub. It's data from both individual businesses, real estate, land, roads, infrastructure planning, but also maps and geographies into the same Data Hub with a data distribution figure, which means that through a simple interface, you can actually access all of these data. Of course, there are elements about private citizens' data, which you cannot access in here, but the idea is to create one-stop shop for all open data, both for the public, but also for the private sector. So where a lot of private companies before had to build various interfaces to different registers to get all the data they needed, they now can go into one single interface and it's for free. So it also enables a whole different set of companies to start accessing public data, where before it was probably more the larger, more sophisticated companies which were able to do that. It's going to be fully implemented next year. We have the first registered online in October 15, and we are now in plans of rolling on the different registers, as you see in the bottom. We've started out with the geodata, so a lot of the geodata are online as we speak. One of the elements which is of course crucial is that we still have a very active dialogue with all the agencies about data quality, because this becomes very quickly obsolete if you don't have the latest quality data in there. So a big part of this infrastructure is also maintaining both a lot of very high service level, this is 24/7 with a 99.9% uptime, but also a high data quality, so you can always be sure that this is the latest data in the Data Hub. So to give you a little bit of feel of how this should actually be thinking, this should be thinking into a lot of different use cases. Some of the things we've been discussing already now is also the option to mash it up with also private data, social data. So a company can go in and mash up the public sector data with their own data, or even social data feeds from the internet. One example could be a small case that we just ran with a very large Danish bank, who provided a lot of their internal banking data, added to that a lot of the geodata in here, and added on top of that a lot of Facebook social data on top to try to answer the questions: how do we evolve our branch structure? How do we get people moved online to the online banking and evolve our branch structure? So a simple user case, which is, as you can probably imagine, for a lot of banks is highly relevant for them, but also something that is value creating it for the society as a whole. Another case is when you move into agriculture. Typically, farmers and small agricultural companies have not been able to use any of these kind of big data opportunities, and it's certainly not public data, small companies. But with this very simple interface, they'll actually be starting using much more of the geodata in the system to optimize their own production. Finally, I think it's quite easy for you to imagine the kind of uses you can have in insurance, in banking, in real estate, for quite a lot of these data. So over the next year or two, we'll be finalizing this Data Hub. I think it's a quite unique piece of infrastructure that's built not only for one register, but across all the public data registers in Denmark, which would enable both individuals, companies, and other public authorities to access data in one place. I think that was what I wanted to add to here. If you want to know more about it, you can also contact the Agency of Digitization, who actually owns the Data Hub. They're the one who's been working on the entire tender. And KMD has been building it over the last year and a half. And we're right now in the process of continuing rolling on new registers to the Data Hub. So in total, a long road for actually really setting free public data, something that takes both business case and business sense, regulatory willingness to actually move forward, and then finally also quite a lot of hard work in terms of how the technical infrastructure and how the registers are actually going to build in. Actually, I'll say the last thing is probably the least. The first two steps are very important in terms of creating the right legal framework, regulatory framework, and creating the business case. Good luck with it.